Alright, I'm going to be reading a chart for Friday, December 21st, 1984 at 4:38 p.m. in Seattle, Washington. And this is kind of an interesting chart. So the first thing I would notice is this is an umbrella chart. Some astrologers might argue that it's not an umbrella chart because the rising isn't a planet, but I say it's basically an umbrella chart because you have the rising on the left side of the chart, which acts as the handle of the umbrella, and then this is all this stuff. All your planets are on one side of the chart, so that's like the top of the umbrella, and so literally every planet is in four signs: Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius. And the only thing on the other side of the chart is the rising in Cancer to balance it or to channel all of this stuff. Also, it's interesting because so you're born in the afternoon at 4:38 p.m., but you were born right on the winter solstice, the first day of winter, which is the darkest day of the year. So even though it was only 4:38 p.m., the sun was already below the horizon. The sun had just set right before you were born, and the moon had just set too because you were born right before a new moon. The new moon probably happened later that day that you were born. So yeah, there's a lot going on here. And so what does that mean? So that means well, first of all, so all the planets being in Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius, that's interesting to me because these are the last four signs before Pisces. So it's kind of the culmination of the zodiac because they're the last four signs before the end. Pisces is the last sign, but Pisces is kind of the, I don't want to say downfall, but it's like the conclusion. It's Pisces has the job of sort of integrating everything and ending everything and alluding to the next cycle. So there's a huge transition there. But before that, these four signs are kind of the culmination because you have one sign of each element that is at the very end before the actual end, before Pisces. So that means that these four signs are the most like abstract or the most external. They all deal with society and the outside world. So you would be very aware of laws, regulations, social customs or traditions, or what's acceptable socially and what is not acceptable. I don't see you being a lawyer because you don't have like, I wouldn't say you have like a super verbal energy where you would like I don't see you as being like a super argumentative person. Like, so not, I don't see you as a debater. I don't want to say that you'd be like a lawyer type person, but you would just be aware of a lot of laws in general and societal norms and stuff like that, and almost like a politician a little bit. So you would be, and you'd just be very aware of these things in order to help yourself to operate within the system, basically. Yeah, and then so most of your energy is centered in this area of the chart, but specifically, the main focus would be Sagittarius 6th house, which has to do with, you'd be a very hands-on person because these both deal with the reality, and you'd be open-minded. You're a Capricorn, but you might not act like the typical Capricorn because you're a little bit more flexible than a typical Capricorn. You're interested in adventure and being open-minded, open to weird experiences or new adventures, new ideas, new people, weird people, different kinds of people, stuff like that. you'd be very open-minded. You have Mercury. Mercury is in detriment in Sagittarius, and it's also retrograde and it's conjunct Uranus. So you think differently than other people. You might not do well in school, or you might have like a speech impediment or a learning disability. But it's not because you're stupid or anything like that. It's just because you have a different way of thinking and communicating than most people do. Like you could actually be a little bit of a genius because of that, just because you might not think linearly. You don't think A, B, C. Like your mind might be more scattered, or you might connect dots in places that people wouldn't usually connect dots. Um, and And yeah, you kind of would act a little bit more like a Sagittarius just because your moon and your Mercury are in Sagittarius and your sun is barely in Capricorn. Um, and your ruling planet is the moon in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is an outgoing sign, an adventurous sign, very optimistic, very excitable, has kind of a roller coaster mentality. You have the moon and Jupiter are both very strong in your chart, and both of those have to do with like fluctuating. So you might be an emotional person. Your mood might go up and down because you would have high expectations and be very optimistic and think that everything is going to be so amazing. And that's great because that can really having that open-minded and optimistic attitude can open you to a lot of possibilities. But sometimes when things don't turn out to be as great as you expected them to, you can go into like a deep depression, but usually it would be short-lived and then pretty soon you're excited again about something else. You kind of, so that this is like the roller coaster mentality I'm talking about, which again is very, it's not, you're not a typical Capricorn. Capricorns are usually very like stable. You would be more up and down. Also, speaking of up and down, your midheaven is Pisces, so in life you would have your whole life would be an interesting story. It would have different twists and turns that might be unexpected. Um, I think one of your main life purposes is just to experience things just for the sake of experiencing them, which I guess you could argue anyone is here to do that, but you're not. Um, I mean, you are very aware of where you fit in society, and you would want a certain amount of respect and power or money. Because, you are still a Capricorn, but at the same time, I think you value experience a lot, like just for the sake of experience. Just you want Well, whether you want it or not, you would have an interesting life story. You'd have many different adventures and misadventures because of all this Sagittarius energy and your Pisces midheaven and your Cancer rising. Because these are emotional, not just emotional, but they're they're emotional, but they're curious and they're open-minded and they can become spiritual or have a connection to people and to the world just because of all the different experiences that they have. Um, I think you have a really good chart for like business, for being a capitalist of sorts, or for being like a business owner. Because so you're a Capricorn, which rules like business. You want to be the boss. You definitely want to be the boss, being a Capricorn. Um, but at the same time, so you have your sun is in an earth sign, but your moon and your Mercury are in a fire sign, and that can be really powerful because um, earth. So you're both you're you can be disciplined and logical, but you can also be very optimistic and creative. So the fire side of your personality can be creative and come up with new ideas and meet new people and like start things and start projects and dream big and stuff. But then you also have a different side of your personality which is more serious and disciplined and actually can think about, this idea is great, but like, how are we actually going to make this work and how are we going to sustain it? It's more about sustainability. Um, like, yeah, I came up with this great, crazy idea or this new business plan, but like, how am I? You'd be a hard worker. Like you'd be able to carry out your plans and to make sure that they are realistic. Um, because Sagittarius is very up. I mean, because it's Sagittarius versus Capricorn, so you have the Sagittarius optimism and enthusiasm, but also the Capricorn discipline and foresight. So it could be sometimes hard to balance such different sides of your personality, but it would also be very rewarding, especially for like business and for doing things in the real world, for meeting people, like networking and stuff like that. But at the same time, you have rising in Cancer, which is also useful because you would be. It's easy to meet people, and it's easy for people to meet you because people see you as trustable. People let their guard around you. Um, and you can approach that in different ways. You could like use that to manipulate people, but if you're kind, then you can also use it to just make friends. Or I see a lot of like business type um, like goals or motivations. So that'd be really good for a business owner to be personable, to be very approachable. You would be approachable and just a friendly person and come off as just a nice, easygoing type of person. What else? Yeah, and then you do have a lot of sixth house energy, so you would be very humble. You might be overly humble. Um, you might treat other people better than you expect to be treated. And you might be a little bit of an empath, and that can be kind of difficult. It's important for you to have boundaries just because you have so much mutable energy between the Sagittarius and the Pisces. But then you do have Sun in Capricorn, so that might provide a little bit of structure. You would be taught to be disciplined, I think. But at the same time, you could be a little bit reckless sometimes. What else? In relationships, you would be very open-minded or even rebellious. You would have something rebellious about your relationship. So, like, either you could be slightly gay or androgynous or something like that because Venus and Mars are in Aquarius, and Aquarius is associated with like homosexuality or bisexuality or different kinds of sexualities. It like taboo type things. You might be you might have like almost rebellious approach to your relationships. Um, but the interesting thing with Aquarius is that Aquarius. So I'm talking about Aquarius because you have Venus and Mars in Aquarius. I can't remember if I said that or not. And Venus and Mars deal with relationships and love and romance and sex and how you approach relationships and also what you're attracted to in a partner. Um, so you would be quirky, eccentric, rebellious in all those areas, and you would be attracted to someone who is a little bit different or unique, someone who's um, different than you are or different than whatever you think is normal. Maybe they're not super accepted in society, and that would be attractive to you. You'd want like a rebel or an outcast type of person. Um, and I forgot what I was just kind of. And they're in the ninth house, so yeah, you want an adventure. Oh yeah, I remember. So Aquarius is very rebellious, like I was saying, but it's also there's kind of a contradiction there because at the same time you do want like a typical romance story. You do want an almost like old school relationship. But at the same time it's in a very like unconventional way. So there's a contradiction there. You want kind of both, the best of both worlds. So a lot of times with Aquarius type relationships you might want like something unconventional but also conventional. So like maybe if you're into business and stuff, then maybe you're the breadwinner, but you're gay or something. Or I don't know. There's a contradiction there. maybe you're like a male breadwinner, but then you're homosexual in a place where it's not accepted or something like that. Usually there's a contradiction there. Traditional yet unconventional at the same time. Um, what else? And you might appear Aquarian, so like you might appear as someone who is a little bit eccentric. Well, you'd definitely be eccentric because you also have this Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius conjunct Uranus. So yeah, you wouldn't be turned off by someone who is different or a little bit out there. You would be interested in abstract ideas, or like even if something sounds ridiculous to you, you would still be open-minded enough to like hear it out and have an opinion about it. And it might still sound ridiculous once you hear it out, but at least you gave it a second to just consider it. I think that you'd be very aware of what everyone is acceptable, what is acceptable to everyone, but at the same time, you wouldn't live by those rules. Like, you wouldn't personally be turned off by something that is unaccepted by society, even though you'd be very aware of it, and you might be a conformist to some extent just because you feel like you need to be to thrive in life. But at the end of the day, deep down, you don't really your your values aren't exactly aligned with like society, and you're probably very aware of that. Most of your challenges are in one area of your chart because you have South Node, Pluto, and Saturn in Scorpio. And it's also interesting because this is like the first part of your chart after your rising, basically. Like the first planet after your rising is Pluto. And then South Node is right after that. Or no, Saturn is after that, and then the South Node. And they're all in Scorpio, so yeah, this is a challenging area of your chart. And they're in the 5th house, so you might have trouble. I think there's a lot of indications in your chart that you would have a challenging childhood or young adulthood, but life would generally get easier for you as you go forward. You would, yeah, definitely. You might be more serious as a child and only be able to really let loose once you get older a little bit, or you might have a lot of challenges when you're younger, and you would learn to thrive a lot more as you age. Um, and yeah, for a lot of reasons, I could list them all off, but I see that in a lot of different ways. Capricorn is kind of like that. I think of it as a Benjamin Button sign, where they start off more mature and cynical and kind of dry, but then as they age, they learn to loosen up, and they usually have a really good dry sense of humor. Sagittarius, like the mutable energy in general, mutable energy is very like naive because it's so open-minded. So usually when they're young, they make a lot of mistakes, but they're not really mistakes as long as they learn from them. And because of all their adventures and misadventures that they have when they're younger, they become very wise in their older years. That's what mutable signs usually do. Your Sagittarius energy would do that. And then also Scorpio usually has its challenges early on, kind of like Capricorn does. So, and then plus Pluto is your first planet, and Pluto has to do with destruction and rebirth. And then Saturn is the next one, and Saturn has to do with being realistic and disciplined and stuff like that. So, and then they're in the sign of Scorpio, which has to do with also destruction and rebirth, and it's a very instinctual sign because it has to do with like surviving. It has to do with some of the more challenging archetypes of the zodiac. So yeah, basically your challenges would occur mostly early in life, but they would be rewarding later because they would kind of toughen you up and make you more wise early on. That way you can thrive later. And you might have a hard time, like your inner child might kind of die when you're younger, and only later would you kind of do the work emotionally so that your inner child can be free again. And that's really important for you because, yeah, it would just take time to redevelop that more creative, like playful side of your personality. You might feel like you have to be very mature when you're younger, um, or like take care of other people when you're younger, be the mature one. So yeah, that's a big theme, that it would take time for you to reconnect to that playful inner child inside of you. But again, that would be very rewarding for you to do, because then it would kind of feed your whole soul, like to do that, to enable this playful side, because that's where your creativity comes from, and that's where the fire, the energy comes from, that would fuel all these goals and ambitions that you have in the rest of your chart. What else? You have Lilith and Taurus, so you'd be a very sensual person. Like sexually, you'd be very touchy. You might like touching people, even as like friends. You might just like being a touchy person, like you'd like hugs and stuff. What else? I mean, yeah, I think I covered most of everything. And then going back to the beginning of what I was saying, you're born right before a new moon. So yes, you would be very open to weird topics, taboo topics, or like aliens and Bigfoot or conspiracy theories. You would be aware of certain parts of the world that other people are not. You might have an intuition. It might particularly be centered around your family because of your Cancer rising, or just the world in general. You might just have a certain intuition, because you just have senses of things that other people cannot perceive. You have Neptune conjunct the Sun, so you might be a mystery to yourself. Your personality might change. Even your physical characteristics might change greatly through your life. You might kind of lack a little bit of self-awareness, because I'm picturing like you look in the mirror and it's like misty all the time, or like foggy, and you can't really. It's difficult to see inside of yourself for some reason. And other people might not totally understand you. You might be a mirror for other people, so that other people, when they look at you, they either see themselves or they see something that's not really you. And your parents might not totally understand you, because all your planets are so far away from the ascendant. So what people expect you to be at first is maybe not necessarily what you actually are inside. But at the same time, you're very aware of other people. You'd be kind of an empath. Yeah, you're extremely aware of other people's thoughts and opinions and feelings. And what else? The moon in Sagittarius. So I'm talking about the moon in Sagittarius because it's your chart ruler, since Cancer, your rising is in Cancer and the moon rules Cancer. And the moon in Sagittarius is interesting because it's a very, like, the moon is simultaneously very comfortable and very uncomfortable in Sagittarius. It's very comfortable because Sagittarius is a happy sign. It's adventurous and optimistic, and the moon feels excited there. The moon, you would feel in your comfort zone outside of your comfort zone. So you would like trying new foods or meeting new people, exploring new places. You would like things that expand your soul and your perception of the world. Excuse me, my nose is running. Sorry. But at the same time, the moon feels kind of ungrounded there, because there are no like boundaries between you or other people. People might step into your space, or you might step into other people's space, and it would be hard for you to have these boundaries. At least your Saturn is direct, so that does give you like structure and some boundaries. But the moon in Sagittarius, you a lot of times there are abandonment issues because deep down you don't feel very like secure or grounded. You feel like you could just like blow away in the wind, kind of. So at the same time, you like exploring, and your ego is not very rigid, so it allows you to like experience all kinds of different things, and you enjoy that. But at the same time, you might crave some structure, especially being a Cancer rising and a Capricorn sun. So it's about a balance. You need adventure, but you also need some stability, and you might actually resist change sometimes. You might actually be kind of stubborn sometimes, even though at the same time you'd also be open-minded and eager for adventure. You need both. So you need like maybe live somewhere for a long time, but also have enough time to take frequent vacations if you can, if you have that luxury. Something like that, something that allows you to experience both the best of both worlds with secure emotional security, but also some adventure periodically. Um, and and then Jupiter's not technically your chart ruler, but you have so much Sagittarius stuff, and then also Jupiter has a connection to Cancer. So Jupiter and the Moon are definitely your strongest planets, and Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn. So, and going back again to how you have all these planets in the most outward societal signs, so you have so many gifts and an intuition with society and the world, but you can be a little bit self-defeating sometimes. Like you're so close to being this huge success and this worldly ambitious person, like a leader or something, but you also have, your Jupiter is in a place where it feels confined, and I think really it just needs time. You need time to evolve. You have a lot of gifts, but you also are born with a lot of challenges that would take you time to learn to understand and to mature and evolve. It would take you time. It would take you maybe one or even two Saturn returns. So I think you would mature a lot by the time you're 30, and then you'd mature even more, like quadruple or tenfold by the time you're 60, and you would just achieve more and more as you age, I think, and feel more secure and achieved, feel more successful. But yeah, you look like an interesting person. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. Let me know what you think about that. And yeah, you do have a lot of gifts. Yeah, it's just interesting. You have a lot of really powerful gifts, but then some definite challenges as well, which I guess most charts are a little bit like that. But yeah, it's interesting. I'd be curious to see what you can achieve for sure, because you would be driven. So let me know what you think. I hope that helps. I hope that's insightful. And yeah, okay, I'll see you later.